What's up, everyone? Happy Wednesday. Well, guys, I am so excited to have a fabulous guest here today. We're welcoming Dr. Mark Young, who is the co-host of the Blunt Forth Truth podcast with Chuck Woolery. He's one of those rare individuals with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. He reserves at least 2 hours a day for studying, staying on top of trends in technology, human behavior, geopolitics, physics, economics, and future studies. His unusual style of processing information and problem solving was formed early on based on his own combinations of epistemology and multidisciplinary thinking. Mark has a PhD in psychology, right, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have one of those things.
So we're gonna just be a couple of psychology nerds today. I think it's gonna be a great podcast. Now, if you want to connect with Mark below, I definitely recommend you subscribe to the Blunt Force Truth podcast. I've been on it a couple times. We've had great conversations both times, and of course, follow Mark on Twitter. Mark, welcome.
It is. I've been looking forward to this because I think you're smart and I like what you do. And I've been eager to get on here. So we're going to have some fun.
I think we are going to have some fun. And one of the things I've been really looking forward to this as well, because when I've been on your show, like I feel like anytime we start to get into like the psychology pieces of it, we don't get to have like the full breadth of the conversation.
True.
Right. Because that's just how it works sometimes. But
Chuck just kind of steps in, he just kind of steps in and says, that's enough of this psychology talk.
Yeah, that's all right. We love Chuck. We do.
He's a great person.
What I wanted to talk to you about is just like, I have been fascinated lately by just like the psychology behind the moment that we're in. I mean, for me, this feels like a dystopian reality. Every day I feel like I get up and I'm like, what Orwellian nightmare are we going to be seeing on the news today? But I think there's a psychology behind why the progressive left, the woke left, act the way they do. And I want to try to like pull that apart with you. Now, my position on this, and my viewers, this will be no surprise about, but like my position on critical race theory, the wokeness and all this stuff is, they frame it a lot of times in terms of race. But I don't think it's really about race. I think what they're doing is using race to try to gain more power, to destabilize the system, because they have ultimately a Marxist agenda that they want to implement, and they can only get there if they've effectively destabilized the system first. What do you think about my hypothesis?
You're dead on. None of this is about race. Mm-hmm. First off, when we look at critical race theory, we have to understand critical race theory comes from critical theory, which was built on Marx and Kant, I believe, the two people that work was built on. And so critical race theory, first off, people got to understand, what does the word theory mean? That means it's an idea, it's a thought. There's no evidence to back this up.
Yes,
we have to start with that. But critical race theory is an attempt to instill Marxism, and racism becomes an easy foil to insert Marxism because no one wants to be accused of being a racist. So it's an easy tool. It's an easy tool to say you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're a bigot, whatever the case is. And as you know, Republicans, for some reason, are just scared to death of being called racist.
Right.
So they just run and hide when anybody accuses them of being a racist. I'm not a racist. And they run off, and they don't want to stand up for capitalism or for free markets because I don't want to be called a racist.
Right. It was funny. There's a story that just came out today that Chris Rufo is breaking about American Express. Like, talk about one of the most capitalistic companies that you could possibly imagine. American Express has actually made its employees go through some sort of training, like denouncing capitalism. And that's like kind of all the evidence we need about where this ideology is going. When you have a legitimate credit card company training their employees to denounce the system on which their entire organization is based, there is something wrong there. And I want to pick apart this a little bit. Like what do you think would cause an HR manager or whoever at a credit card company to say, you know what our employees really need? They need to hate capitalism.
So I actually have those documents. They were sent to me.
Really?
Yes. And the program is actually in the documents. The program is How to Be Less White.
Oh, it's one of those.
So that's actually what's in the documents, how to be less white.
Right.
But you have to keep in mind that punctuality, competition, accountability, motivation, these are all part of white supremacy.
Yes.
And that this is part of the white culture, and it's racist to want to have capitalism and compete and do all these things. So what motivates a company like American Express? What motivates companies like American Express is the same thing that motivates cowardly Republicans.
Mhm.
And that is, well, we want to be loved by everybody.
Mhm.
And the people with that make the most noise tend to get the most attention, even though they don't make up the majority of the population. So we see it. So let me give a little background here, folks. I have a degree in psychology, but I run an advertising agency.
Mm.
So I deal with this stuff all the time. And our clients will get emails. So I get to see these. And these are emails. As an example, I'm never going to do business with your company because you ran a commercial on Tucker Carlson. And that means you're a white supremacist. And that means that you support Nazism. And that means this and that means that. And I'm going to boycott your product. Now, our client will get, that client might get 200 emails in a week. But here's the thing, and we'll show this to the client. Say, let's examine the emails. Notice the language is the exact same email, word for word.
Mhm.
Okay, that's not a coincidence. It's because it's a cut and paste email being sent by 25 people that each have 25 email addresses,
Mhm.
and they're firing it off. Well, these little barrages of emails panic these corporate executives. It freaks these people out.
Right.
And there's one other thing I want to point out to you too, and that is there is a difference between entrepreneurship and between big company management.
Mhm.
And there is a difference between capitalism and crony capitalism. When we look at entrepreneurs like an Elon Musk,
Mhm.
Elon Musk is an entrepreneur. He's a guy who creates things where nothing existed. And he's doing it with his own money. And he's out there, betting on himself. Once we get into these large companies like an American Express, like a Citibank, whatever the case is, there's no entrepreneurship left here.
Mhm.
These are companies that run like basically quasi-governmental units with professional managers.
Yeah, it's true.
And where do those professional managers come from, Carlin? They come from universities.
They do.
And what are you indoctrinated into at university?
Critical race theory.
And Marxism
Mhm.
and the evils of the industrial military complex and the fault of capitalism and all of the bad things that come with freedom.
Mhm.
Because you kind of see where I'm going. These people
Yeah.
running these big corporations, they came out of that university background. And think of what else. They never had to take the risk of betting their own money.
It is a really different thing, and it's like, so I'm you're making me think back to about 10 years ago when I was still like an employee within organizations, and there was this idea that was popping up about like entrepreneurship. Like that was the, if you were like an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, you were someone that was like building business lines within an organization, you were trying new things, you were going outside of the box, and that was something that around, I want to say like 10-15 years ago, that was something that was being encouraged. And it was fun for me because I was very much one of those entrepreneurs where I wanted to do things differently and I wanted to try new things. And, I ended up getting myself promoted up through the ranks purely because I would try things that no one else would. Well, fast forward, to where we are now. And even before I kind of was like, doing all this politics stuff, I started noticing in organizations I was working with that, and now I'm talking as an organizational psychologist coming in and doing consulting, that entrepreneurship didn't exist anymore. And it was
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't kind of put my finger on it at the time, but I remember being very confused about like, why aren't people taking more initiative? And I would have managers come to me all the time saying, how do I just get my employees to do things without me having to tell them what to do? And now I've come to the point where I kind of have realized and put two and two together that because of like, I think how much the education system has changed, and because of like not how only how higher education has impacted these people, but also how K through 12 education has impacted them, they've never learned how to do things without being told exactly what to do. They've never picked up on those entrepreneurship characteristics. They've always just been like, think about it in school, right? Like you're handed an assignment, you do the assignment. You're not supposed to ask questions. And even in this woke ideology, any dissent is kind of smacked down immediately, right? You're not encouraged to dissent at all. You're just supposed to listen and regurgitate. And so when we take that and put that into organizations, that's just going to lead to a lot of employees that are just order takers, that are just there to do the job and, do what they're told and not question anything. Am I off base there?
You are completely on. There is research that shows that this current youth generation, this young generation, and the generation right ahead of them
Mm-hmm.
are the most compliant Americans in the history of the country.
Oh my God.
So they're compliant. They do what they're told. Now, there's a problem with doing what you're told
Mm-hmm.
because real success comes from what? Real success comes from taking risk and breaking rules.
Risks. Yes.
It doesn't come from being a criminal, but it comes from taking risks and breaking rules.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean you break the rules of the law, but it means you break the rules of how it's always been done because you decide, I'm going to find a better way to do this.
Right.
Well, we've created through the education system a generation of people who are amazingly compliant. They don't take risk. Let me give you an example.
Sure.
Okay. I'm older than you. When I was young, what was a big thing? Motocross. Lots of people rode motocross, right?
Mm-hmm.
Motocross tracks are going out of business now.
That's right.
Why? It's too risky. Oh, I get hurt. It's
Mm-hmm.
dangerous.
Johnny might fall down and scrape his knee.
Absolutely. So now so if I want to race motocross today, what'll I do? Well, I'll do it on a video game.
Yeah.
Because I can sit on a couch, I can do it, while eating Cheetos in mom's basement. There's no risk involved. We're taking the risk out. And again, think of what not only education, but what has the government done? What is this administration doing? This administration is telling us all the risk in life needs to be removed.
Right.
There
Right.
should be no risk. Government will tell you what to do. We're going to tell you to take a vaccine. We're going to tell you to wear a mask. We're going to tell you where you can go and where you can't go because we know better for you because we're the open society. We're the chosen few people who know what the rest of all of you unintelligent people need. And we've educated this younger crowd to pay attention to it.
Right.
Now think about it. When you see people that are really putting up an objection to what's going on in this country right now, what are their ages?
And they're older.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of us still had the experience of living with freedom.
Right.
But some of us have never even had the experience of freedom. If all you've done, if you're a lion and the only place you've ever lived is in a zoo, then you think being in a cage is normal.
Right. I mean, we've even seen articles come out because I do think that there, of course, there are kids that have red-pilled parents, conservative parents that teach them the ways that are different than the woke. But then, I've seen articles come out where teachers are actually really angry when parents red pill their kids and teach them differently than what they're being taught in schools. And teachers, frame their relationship with their students as like they're my kids. Well, no, they're not your kids, as it turns out. But one of the things that really scares me is, one of the very best ways that we can learn and grow and get better at whatever we want to do is through failure. Failure is the ultimate teacher, and we've started to create an environment where failure is just not allowed ever.
Right, which means without failure you eliminate success.
Mhm.
Because if you don't have risk, you can't have reward.
Mhm.
And that's what we're teaching people. But we're also, think about it, Carlin, we're teaching people to lower their expectations.
Yes.
Lower your expectations. We talked about just before we were on air here. We were talking about wokeism and what the core of this is. And when you look at this, Marxism is based on envy.
Yeah.
And we used to teach against the ills of envy up until about 1860, 1870s. And then we stopped teaching about envy. And the reason we stopped it was because it became a political philosophy.
Mhm.
And there's a difference between jealousy and envy. Jealousy is, I want what you have. Envy is, I don't want you to have what you have. I know I'm never going to have it, but I don't want you to have it either. Look at tweets from like Elizabeth Warren going after Jeff Bezos, just trashing him for Blue Origin, trashing him that he's burning off money that should belong to the poor, the downtrodden in his run to be in space. That's pure envy. Elizabeth Warren knows she's not going to get his money.
Right.
She just doesn't want him to have it.
Yeah.
And that's what this political movement is based on. It's based on envy, it's based on not being accountable, it's based on removing risk, and it is based on people not having to, as I said, not having to be accountable for their own actions.
Mhm. You know, I was at James Lindsay's workshop on critical race theory in Tampa a couple weeks ago, and he does a section in his workshop where he talks about how do we fix this problem. And one of the most poignant pieces of advice that I think he gave was about instilling responsibility and accountability in people. And that's one of the ways that you can try to fix this problem, because the minute that people start to internalize responsibility and accountability is the minute that they start abandoning this woke ideology that basically says like you should be able to have everything you want at the snap of a finger without having to work, and you know, if they try to make you work, that's white supremacy and all of these things. And you know, I couldn't help but think that that the reason that responsibility and accountability is a cure for the woke, or one of the cures, is because I think that the woke have a profound lack of self-worth. And I think that part of the reason they have a lack of self-worth is because they've never really had to push themselves to achieve anything great. They just keep getting handed thing after thing after thing. And the only way that we can develop self worth or confidence in ourselves and know that we have value to give out to the world is if we are forced into a position kind of needing to achieve great things. And then once we get past the obstacles that we need to achieve those great things, we say, oh my God, I can do this. What else can I do? What else can I give to the world? What do you think about that?
First off, self-worth is created through
Hmm.
competition and through achievement.
Yes.
That's how you get it. So if you're never given the opportunity to excel, then you're never given the opportunity to have the self-worth and the feelings of value that you create, because people can't create value in you. You have to create value in you.
Hmm.
When we look at critical race theory, we look at BLM, you talked about racism. Critical race theory is racist.
Hmm.
BLM is racist. They are trying to destroy the Black community with what they are doing. They are telling Black people they are not smart enough to get an ID. They're telling Black people, you're not smart enough to pass an entrance exam to a college. You're not smart enough to be punctual. You're not even smart enough to pass an exam at the end of your school year.
Hmm.
How can you possibly have self worth when your leaders are telling you you're so inferior that we have to change the rules just for you? We can't give you equality and say we're going to give you the same shot as the brown kid and the white kid and the rich kid and the poor kid. Nope. We're going to lower the standards, because without us there to lower the standards, you don't have a chance. Now
Hmm.
imagine, how could anyone have self-worth when they're being told they don't have a chance unless government lowers the standards for them?
Hmm.
How horrible is that?
I think it's devastating, and I think, you know, a lot of people when it comes to critical race theory, they focus on the white aspects, like it says be less white in the training, right? So it must just be against white people. But I think one of the most insidious parts of this entire ideology is it's teaching young black, and to a lesser extent these days brown children, because they don't really care about Latinos at all, but like definitely black children, like you cannot be successful in the world unless white people lift you up and put you in this position. And you can't do it through your own hard work. You can't do it because of your own competence or your own intelligence. The only way you're going to be successful is if white people lift you up. And they're not only telling that to adults, they're telling it to children as young as 4 years old.
Right? How
And
horrible is that?
it really
It's not,
makes
it's child abuse.
it is child abuse. Feel exactly the same way. It is absolutely child abuse because I mean, you know this, but if someone gets an idea in their head before they are 8 years old, that idea gets pretty well cemented in there. And it's not to say you can't change it, but it's really, really hard to change it after when they grow older, just because of how our brain changes when we grow up. And that to me is like, you know, like when I try to vision out maybe like 5 or 10 years from where we are now, knowing what I've seen taught in the schools to young kids, I'm terrified of the reality that we're walking into, Mark. What do you think we're walking into in like 10 years?
So I come from a school of psychology which is called human givens.
Mm,
And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but it's a different kind of therapy, human givens theory.
Yeah.
And in human givens, one of the things that we come from the position of the majority of trauma, psychoses, fears,
Mhm.
anxieties, that these things, the majority of them happen before the age of 7 years old.
Mm.
And these things get cemented in there and they become part of the unconscious mind. And then as that person gets older, different trigger events happen, which bring up those thoughts. So now we're talking about taking kids as young as that or close to that, as you're saying, and
Mhm.
telling them, well, I'm sorry you're black, but that makes you inferior.
Right.
And this white guy over here, he's trying to hurt you. This 7-year-old white guy is going to spirit murder you, which is the term now. This white kid might spirit murder you, or your white teacher might spirit murder you by asking you to complete the test today, or
Right.
by asking you to read this book today. You're being told by your supposed leaders that you're incompetent, that you're incapable, that you can't survive without somebody lifting you up or somebody lowering the standards. How can you not feel bad about yourself
Mhm.
if this is what you're being taught? How can you not feel bad about yourself when this is your life? Now, by the way, you and I can both tell people of tons of examples of this by having abusive parents.
Right.
So somebody has an abusive parent that tells the kid they're a piece of crap since they could talk. What is that kid's experience going to be when that kid gets older?
Exactly.
I'm a useless piece of crap because I've been told that for the past 18 years.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's exactly what we're doing to these kids.
That's exactly right. You know, some people in the chat are saying spirit murder. That comes from somewhere though.
Oh, I
Chris
didn't make
Rufo.
that up.
No, that's a real thing. Chris Rufo uncovered documents that literally say that is the terminology being used, right?
And not only is that the terminology being used, but that information was sent out to 13,000 schools by the Biden administration last month. That
Mhm.
this is the criteria that we want to follow. And it is about spirit murdering Black children by trying to hold them to what they're referring to as white standards. Now, the reality is being punctual a white concept?
No.
No.
No. I remember visiting Machu Picchu like 5, 6 years ago, and they had like the sundials on Machu Picchu. Was that created by a white person? No.
Oddly enough, now that was created by my daughter's people, because my daughter's a Mayan Indian.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Mhm.
So again, yes, do I know what it's like to have a brown person in my house? Yes, I do.
Mhm.
And does my brown daughter think that she needs white people to go open doors for her? No,
No.
she does not think that. Um, you look at what's his name, Robertson from Duck Dynasty.
Yeah.
Willie Robertson. He's taken a bunch of heat because he has a Black adopted son, and he hasn't had the talk with him.
Oh.
And Willie's answer is, why do I need to talk to him? I have a white son, I have a Black son. Both my sons know they get pulled over by the police. You're polite. You say yes or no, sir, and you do what the police officer tells you, and you'll be fine.
Mhm.
So he's been pillared because, well, you have a Black son. You have to tell him the police are going to kill him if they pull him over. He's
Mhm.
like, but they're not going to kill him. My son's not worried that the police are going to kill him because he's not going to do stupid crap if the police pull him over.
Mhm. Mhm.
But again, this is what we're being taught, and something you and I talked about. We're talking about a system, a philosophy that is built on the hierarchy, a hierarchical model of victimhood.
Yes.
So when we talk about people having no self-esteem, you can't have self-esteem if people are telling you that you're incapable of doing things. But you can have a false sense of self-esteem.
Mhm.
And that's where this mentality comes from of I'm better than you.
Mhm.
And where that I'm better than you comes from is in identifying with the nobility of my victimhood. I am superior to you because I am a bigger victim.
Mhm.
So if I'm a white male, I'm at the bottom of the victim pile. I can't, I'm an oppressor. I can't be a victim. If I'm a white woman, okay, I've got a little more victimhood. At least I'm a woman. I can claim victimhood. But if I'm a black woman, I got a little more. Now, if I'm a gay black woman, I get to move up a little farther. Maybe I'll join the Islamic faith, and that'll move me a little closer to the top.
Mhm.
But the more things that I can do to validate my victimhood,
Mhm.
the more moral superiority I can take to you, and the less I'm responsible for my own actions and my own failures.
Well, and that's really, I mean, like you hit the nail on the head at the end there. It's about not taking responsibility for what you put out in the world. And I think, part of that is that they don't feel like they have it again, like they don't have the self-worth to feel like they have value to give out to the world. So of course they're going to do what they can do to deflect and say, I don't like I'm a victim. I don't have to take responsibility for what I'm giving. And there used to be a time when they might learn this crap in college and then they go out into the real world and they get a real job and they had bosses who held them accountable to actually doing things the correct way, and that would kind of mitigate some of the stuff that they learned in college, right? That's not happening anymore.
No, because now you have lots of woke corporations
Mhm.
that are more focused on trying to appease the mob than they are capitalism and trying to be profitable.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these companies I mean, think about this stupid concept that American Express is doing, how to be less white. Okay, could you come up with a more racist comment than that? Because, Carlin, what is racism? Racism is trying to diminish the value of one race over another.
Mhm.
Telling people that they need to be less white is saying what? That there's something wrong with you because you're white.
Yep.
I had no choice in who I am when I was born.
Mhm.
My race, my ethnicity was predetermined. I had no choice in it. This is the reason Martin Luther King fought for the day when people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their character, by the
Mhm.
content of their character. Critical race theory is telling people content of character means nothing, and the color of your skin means everything.
Mhm.
They're the direct opposite. And what do we see? We see universities that are now setting up black only dorms.
Mhm.
They're actually asking for segregation.
Exactly.
The generations before them fought to get rid of segregation, which was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Segregation was horrible. And now they want segregation back. And I'm going to ask you the question. Why do they want segregation back?
Well, they want segregation back because they want to keep us pitted against each other. They can't achieve their goal of destabilizing the system to implement their little Marxist reality if we're working together, if we are a cohesive unit. They need to pit us against each other, and race is the easiest way to do that. And they're already they're seeing it being effective. When we're fighting each other, that means we're not fighting them.
We have right, we have to create this tribalism.
Yep.
And now they have found a new tool to use. Now it's not just race, now it's vax and unvax.
Oh god.
Now
Oh
we're going
god.
to but look at we're turning that into a
Mhm.
battle
Yep.
over well you're not a vaxxer. You're an anti-vaxxer. You can't come over to my house. I can't have anti-vax people in my house.
Right.
Now let's forget about the science. Let's forget about well maybe this person has already had COVID and actually already has antibodies that are superior to what you would get from a vaccine
Mhm.
because we don't want to follow any science. Science is trashed
Right.
and we're going to create another division. I cover, something I talked about yesterday, if I can share it with you, and that
Sure.
is we hear all these people talk about follow the science. We're only following the science, right?
Mhm.
Folks, I'm here to tell you that nobody's following any science. And don't believe it when you hear this. But I will tell you, I did some checking. And Nazi Germany actually used the terms following the science when they produced the work on the Aryan nation.
No way.
And what they were doing was we were following the science. And the science of Germany showed that the Aryan race was a superior race, that they were genetically superior. And by following the science, we first needed to get rid of the defective people and get rid of the people, that were, broken. because we didn't want the race to be polluted because we're following the science. Then we moved ourselves up. Well, these Jewish people are not pure.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only following the science, folks. It's not like we hate people, but we're following the science. And I can show you other examples through history, through the past 100 years, where we have claimed science. I will give you another example. Eugenics.
Mm-hmm.
When we go and we look at the history of Planned Parenthood, and we look at the history of Margaret Sanger was a big promoter of eugenics. Go look at her writings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to remind people, this was Hillary Clinton's hero. This is who Hillary Clinton wrote her dissertation on. This is who Hillary Clinton received the Margaret Sanger Award. Margaret Sanger's position was, and again, we're back to follow the science, was her claim. Black children were inferior. And therefore, it would be a kindness on our part to promote abortion and to get rid of them because they were just going to have a miserable life anyways. So we should be reducing them. To this day, Carlin, 75% of all Planned Parenthood locations are within 5 minutes of a Black community.
Yep. It's true.
But what was she doing? She was following the science. And this is not, and I want people to understand, this is not me having a conversation about being pro-choice or pro-life. This is me having a conversation about history.
Right.
No matter what your position is on Planned Parenthood today, know that the history of that organization came from eugenics.
Mm-hmm.
Note that Hitler came through following the science. We're now telling people to follow the science. We are not following the science.
No.
But we've now turned this into another way of separating people into group A and group B.
Yeah, it's about tribalism and creating an outgroup, and it's really disturbing seeing what's happening. I just want to do a couple super chats real quick. Jenny's getting inky with it. Says this guest doesn't disappoint. No, Mark never disappoints. I will tell you guys that. And Alexandra says good Wednesday afternoon, peeps. Make sure you mount that like hard today. This convo is important, so informative already. Thank you, docs. So, Mark, I guess
It's very kind.
Yeah, I have a kind audience. They're nice people, and thank you, Vaughn, for that super sticker. So like, how do we start to reverse this? Because that's kind of where I've been focused on lately. I just finished a book and sent it off to the publisher about how to fight back against the woke, and thinking about what average everyday people can do to start fighting back. Because I truly believe that we're in a cultural revolution right now. We are in a cultural revolution, exactly like what happened in China. And I think that if everyday average people don't start standing up and speaking out and fighting back in the real world, not just like, sending tweets and what have you, we're going to have a problem on our hands. What do you think?
You're correct. We have the issue we have to deal with now is, first off, those of us that I'm going to say on the right. And I want people to understand, I'm a conservative. I'm not a Republican. The Republicans have been as big a problem, as the Democrats in many of these situations.
Feckless cowards, all of them.
Yeah. And when I look at the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, I see one party that is in a full run towards socialism, and the other one's kind of strolling toward it.
Yes.
Now,
I agree.
That being said, people like me usually get forced to vote for Republicans because they're the closest thing we can find. And I want to say that there are some Republicans in the House and Senate that are good people.
Yes.
So, I mean, when you look at the way Rand Paul's been standing up recently,
he's a champion.
Absolutely. And he's a Republican, but he's really a libertarian.
Yes.
Is what he really is. And my philosophy, Carlin, is closer to libertarianism. My belief is that you and your same-sex partner should be able to own a pot farm and have machine guns to defend it.
Exactly. Perfect.
So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. Now, what do we need to do? Well, first off, we need to stop being afraid of cancel culture. We need to stop being afraid of being ostracized, of being called a racist, of having somebody say that we're Neanderthals because we think something. You have to stop doing that. The second thing we have to do is we need to be involved in what our children are learning. Because too many families have handed over their kids for 12 years to the woke mob who is teaching these kids and not paying attention to the curriculum that they're being given. You need to look at what they're doing. You need to look at their tests. You need to read their papers. You need to start looking at the books that they're reading and correct it and tell your kids where it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this with my daughter, by the way. And I remember had one of her teachers told her that America was no longer a republic, that it was a democracy.
No.
and I confronted this teacher
Mm-hmm.
in a group parent teacher conference where all the parents were there. And when I confronted this kid or this teacher, I watched the other parents just shrink. It's like, oh my God, what is he doing? No, don't challenge the teacher. You could see their uncomfortableness. And all I said was, why are you telling the kids we're not a constitutionally limited republic? Because, well, we're not. We're a democracy. No, we're a constitutionally limited republic with 50 democracies inside of it. And so where's your evidence that we ceased being a republic? Well, that happened when we lowered the voting age to 18.
What?
I said, okay, so how did that happen? Well, because we were a constitutionally limited republic. This is him speaking. And by the way, I found his exact words on the NEA's website.
Oh my God.
So we were a constitutionally limited republic when only 21-year-olds could vote, because a republic limits access to freedom. It limits access to voting and doesn't allow everyone to vote. A democracy allows everyone to vote. So when we lowered the age to 18, came a democracy. And I said, so I looked at him like, so 17-year-olds aren't humans?
Yeah.
Or 16-year-olds aren't humans? Why can't they vote? Like, this is the most ridiculous comment that I've ever heard. But that's the kind of garbage that they're teaching in school. Most people don't know this. You go through the history books that are being taught in K through 12 right now.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of almost every book is factually incorrect today.
Yeah.
What is being taught.
Mm-hmm.
Your kids aren't going to know this if you don't stand up and do something about it. Now, another thing, the left does a much better job of getting out and being heard.
Yes.
So when somebody runs that commercial, it lands on Tucker Carlson. Well, guess what? They've got their armies out there that are going to send those emails out and say, Tucker Carlson's white supremacist, I'm never going to buy your product.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You need to take your time and send your letters out to those companies.
And this is what I used to tell this to the right all the time when Mike Lindell was getting canceled and all of his, pillars were getting put out of the big box stores and everything. And the conservatives were all like, we're going to boycott. We're going to boycott. And I said, have you written a letter to the company telling them why you're not buying their product anymore? And they said, no, why would we do that? I was like, what do you think they're going to think if you just they're not going to know why? Like, you have to tell them. And I've worked in organizations where every complaint letter they get, it goes into a folder and it gets passed around the office and all the directors have to read them. They really do read this stuff. But if you don't give them a chance to understand why you're not buying from them, then you've defeated the entire purpose.
So you need to get out and you need to start writing emails. One, start writing emails to corporations, congratulating them for doing good things. I appreciate that you support Tucker Carlson and Fox News. Write them letters when they do the stupid things. Write them letters and tell them, I'm not going to come to your store anymore because you've dropped Mike Lindell because of politics. And just tell them straight up. This is not about Mike Lindell at this point.
No.
I am telling you, I'm not going to do business with a company that makes a decision on what products I can purchase from them based on politics. I want those decisions based on the quality of products. They need to hear this. You need to be reaching out. I'm going to give you another thing. Walk in the local office to your member of Congress. So in the world of politics, Congress people know that for every one contact they get from a voter, there is 50 to 100 more voters who feel the same way. And if you really want to get their attention, walk in their local office, because that actually rattles their cage. Walk in that office and say, I'd like to talk to somebody about Congressperson X position on Bill HR 1.
Mhm.
What is your position on HR1? And let those people know, if my rep votes for HR1, I'm going to work to make sure you don't get reelected.
Yep.
That matters to these people, because I'm going to tell you, when you, at the end of the day, when you talk about a politician, the only thing that matters to almost most of them is getting reelected and raising money.
Yep.
And if they know that people are going to raise money against them and work against them, it actually changes, it actually affects them.
Mhm.
We
And
need to be heard.
And I think average people might think like, I'm just one person. I'm nobody in the grand scheme of things. What can I do? Like why would they even listen to me? But what people don't understand is that there really aren't that many people doing this. There aren't
Not.
like the left is like very coordinated in this. They'll have groups of people that are all going and saying the same things. The right doesn't do this. And so one of the things I learned, I was working with the state representatives in New Hampshire when they were working to pass the anti-CRT bill here. And one of the things they told me is that we only ever hear from people when they are opposed to a bill. We never hear from people when they are supportive of the bill. And so I got 2,000 people to email the state representatives in New Hampshire in support of the anti CRT bill. And it ended up being like right around the same volume of opposition they were getting, but it actually meant much more to them because they're so not used to hearing from people when they're in support of a bill that it actually it didn't even matter that it was about the same volume because they just don't hear that ever.
Now, let me tell you what else people need to do, if I could, Carlin. We need to get out and we need to start running for local offices.
Mm,
When you look at people, and we've all heard the name of the boogeyman, George Soros, but the reality is George Soros is spending a lot of money financing local elections, and he is really spending a lot of money on attorney generals and prosecutor races.
mm-hmm,
And this is how he is destroying many of these big cities like Chicago and Seattle and LA by putting these prosecutors in place who refuse to enforce the law.
mm-hmm.
Now, school boards, the left is doing a better job of getting out and running for these school boards and city councils. And that's how we're losing control of these schools. So you can take a community that is a generally conservative Republican city, and you'll find they have an all liberal school board because that's who got out and ran for it. And now you're sitting there saying, holy crap, I live in this Republican city with all these conservatives and my school boards insisting on critical race theory. How did this happen? Why would our schools do this? Because we let it happen. So we need to get involved, start going to those meetings and run for those offices. Take control of your school board, take control of your city council.
Mm-hmm.
The founding fathers, when this country was built, the idea was that the federal government would be the invisible hand, that it would be the least important government in your life, that you wouldn't even pay attention to the federal government because it would be so distant and so irrelevant. And that the government that would really matter would be your mayor, your city council, and then the county officials, and then your governor, that it would be local. We've flipped this upside down. Most people can't even tell you who the name of their mayor is or who's on their city council or anyone that's on their school board. We've lost control of the local level. We need to take it back.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but the idea that people need to get up and start expressing themselves. I mean, I think one of the most detrimental things that the right has done is they've labeled themselves the silent majority and have taken pride in being the silent majority and have internalized that as who they are. They're just people that they keep to themselves and they show up and they vote and that's all they do. Well, guess what? The most powerful people in any circumstance are the people that are expressing themselves. It does not matter if they are the majority. If they are expressing themselves, they're speaking up, they're saying we should do this, not that. They're getting out, they're running for office. You can be like if the majority is against those people who are expressing themselves, you can have as many people as you want, but at the end of the day, they're ultimately going to win because you're sitting in your house and not doing anything. They're the ones that are showing up. And so what we found in organizations like because for people who might not know, like I'm an organizational psychologist, not like the clinical psychologist. I work with
Mhm.
businesses, but in organizations, 31% of any organization are positive and optimistic about what's going on in that organization, but oftentimes they aren't speaking up. So in a lot of work environments, you have a lot of Debbie Downers that are going into meetings and saying, oh, this will never work, whatever, and optimistic ones aren't speaking up. Once the positive and optimistic ones start speaking up, the organizational morale starts to become more positive and optimistic. Well, it's the same thing is true with politics or with anything else. If you're being silent and you're taking that as a point of pride that you're silent, you're going to lose, because the people who ultimately will win the day are the people who are speaking up.
So it becomes the 12 angry men model.
Yes.
And typically what we find when you put a group of people together, and you know this especially because organizational psychology, you put a group of people together, there is one or two people in that organization or in that group of people that is the real alpha personality in that room. And from a marketing standpoint, this is why I don't like focus groups. Because in a focus group, you have one alpha person in the room who drags all the other people with them.
Yep.
So part of it is the alpha person influences some of the other people that are on the bubble and not all that strong. And then the next tier of people are the tier of people who just don't want to be disliked and they want to go along with the group. And I want everybody to think that I'm like everybody else, so I'll go along with it. So this is kind of an explanation of what's happening. As we need to stop being the silent majority, and we need to be willing to be the alpha in the room. But I want to just caution people. The left is very quick to always devolve any philosophical arguments into personal attacks. As soon as they run out of a good reason to disagree with you, it becomes you're stupid, you're racist, you're whatever the case is, you're ugly, who knows, whatever the attack is. Don't fall for it. Because the argument is lost when you turn it into a personal attack. Stay above them. Don't get into the name calling. I see a lot of conservatives on Twitter and I see them call names. It's like, man, let's not go there. We don't need to call people names. Let's call them out for their philosophy. Let's call them out for their behavior. Let's call them out for their actions. Let's not just call them names because they look funny or whatever the case is. That's, sometimes it's, I get it. Sometimes it's humorous. I got to be honest with you. Sometimes I can't avoid the fact that Lori Lightfoot looks like Beetlejuice.
She really does. She looks like a gremlin. I'm sorry.
I know. And I'm not trying to be mean, but I can't, I see her and I can't not see that. It's just a problem. But for the most part, let's try to stay above it and let's try to stay on the subject. But back to what you're saying, we need to get out and vote. We need to get out with our money. We need to support candidates. We need to call candidates out when they're doing the wrong things, including our candidates. When if you're voting Republican, Republicans do something you don't like, which like a $1.2 trillion bill getting approved, let them know that. Let these people know, you know what? I'm going to work to primary you out. I am only one person, but guess what? Those single voices matter to these people. Your voice can scare the hell out of a member of Congress, believe it or not, when they know, because they know you're not the only person.
Exactly.
So when they all of a sudden get 50 letters or 100 letters saying you're going in the wrong direction, that matters to them. That to them is a lot.
Now, Mark, we have about 10 minutes left in our chat here, and I want you to do a little, I want you to be a futurist for me for a second. So let's say that the silent majority stays silent. They don't take any of the good advice that we've offered in this interview. They don't, get up. They don't speak out. They don't get on their school board. They don't do any of these things. What does our country look like in 10 years?
Well, the issue, we've got a couple of issues. So what we have to do is we have to look at demographics. So when we look at demographics, first we know that as people get older, they become more conservative. Step one. We are an aging country. So we are a country where we're not even hitting our own replenishment rate now for having children. So as the country ages, the country will become more conservative. The second thing when we look at demographics is, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, conservative families have more children than liberal families.
Yes, they do.
So we are actually raising up more conservative children. Well, how is that? Because the number one determining factor and what religion you will be and what party you will be affiliated with when you grow up is your family.
Mhm.
So religions run in families, political parties run in families. Not always, but very often. Well, my family's always been a Democrat, they've always been a Republican. So there are more Republicans having children than there are Democrats having children. So demographically, the trend from the demographic standpoint is actually in favor of conservatism. Now, where do I think we'll be in 10 years? There's a number of factors that are going to come into play. There's always, when you look at these political movements, there's always a pendulum swing. And right now, the pendulum is swinging way to the left right now. But when the pendulum gets way to the left, we have to keep in mind that the majority of people are at the bottom of the pendulum.
Mhm.
They're not far right, they're not far left, they're right where that pendulum hangs in the center. Whenever that pendulum goes too far in one direction, it will tend to swing back. The left right now, the Mark, and I don't even think this is a Democratic Party anymore, it's the Marxist Party.
Yeah.
We just need to call them what they are. This is the Marxist Party. The Marxist Party has overplayed their hand. The majority of Americans do not want to get rid of capitalism. They don't want critical race theory. They don't want open borders. We know this. This is where people are. That pendulum will swing back in the other direction. Where the wild card in all this prediction comes from, Carlin, is how much damage can one administration like this do? How long will it take to reverse that damage? And what actions will China be taking during this time?
Mm.
So imagine you're the leaders in China. So you're Ping or you're, Putin, and you're looking at your enemy, the United States, and you see that the most important thing to them right now is critical race theory or
Mhm.
tearing down statues or and you got to understand, to China, to Russia, that makes us look frivolous. That makes us look not serious, that these are not even serious people, that we can do damage to them like crazy. Think about what we're telling people. We've told people that a handful of people without weapons, led by a guy dressed like the head of the Water Buffalo Association, almost overthrew the United States government. This is what we're telling people.
Right.
We almost lost the country from a guy wearing a water buffalo hat with his painted face and a bunch of people who were ushered in by the police without any weapons. If I'm China, I'm looking back saying, wow, it wouldn't take much to take this country over, would it? Boy, you get 30 people in a water buffalo and you could take their entire capital over.
Mhm.
So we're telling people that we're weaklings, we're not serious. So China is a threat. Russia is a threat, but China is a bigger threat. So what we look like moving forward is going to be very much based on what we do militarily and what we do from a diplomatic standpoint. The good news for us is that China is actually a house of cards
Mhm.
that is in far more trouble and at far greater risk of collapsing than most people realize. That's one of the beauties of it.
Mm. Okay. All right.
When you look at China very quickly, China as a continent is ungovernable. When people don't understand that China has like 2,200 languages, different dialects inside that one country,
Right.
and you think we're getting tribal, they are tribal.
Hmm.
And when you get outside of the major cities, the Communist Party doesn't even really have control of what's going on there. Now you have an economy, the Chinese economy, which is completely built on debt, other people's debt.
Mhm.
So would you rather be the person who owes somebody $1 trillion or the person who is owed $1 trillion?
I would rather be the person that owes someone $1 trillion.
Exactly. So if you're China and you decide you want your $1 trillion back from the US,
Yeah.
what would you like? Do you want us to ship you some cars? Would you like some blue jeans?
Mhm.
Maybe some corn.
Yeah.
You can't repossess a country.
Exactly. Like,
right?
tough luck. We don't have it. We're not paying it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So they've built an entire economy which is on a manipulated currency that in the long term doesn't hold up.
All right. All right. That's a little bit of a white pill moment for me, Mark. Um, do you have hope for where we're going, or are we too far into this cultural revolution thing to turn it around?
Uh no, we can turn this around. So this doesn't look much honestly, this looks very similar to how the 60s looked.
Hmm.
Now I was not a teenager, I was just a small kid in the 60s, but I have enough memory and enough information to remember the riots on the campuses and the protests and Kent State and all these things that were happening during the 60s. What we have right now is all those college people from the 60s are now in Congress. Now they're the people in charge. So the Hillary Clintons and the Pelosi's and the Schumers and the Bernie Sanders, they were the radicals of the 60s.
Mhm.
Their era is fading.
Yeah.
Their time is going out. I mean, when you look at my God, you look at the House and Senate right now. It's a for the most part, it should be a nursing home over there.
It really should be. They're all so old.
As younger people start to move in, you're going to see that it's not going to be the 60s radicals anymore.
Mhm.
Now you're starting to see people from this what I'll call the 70s and 80s. So now you start to get a Mike Lee, you start to get a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul with
Mhm.
different thinking. So I think we're going to see better thinking start to move into there. Now, we still have this young generation like the AOCs that are a problem, but even when you look at them, they're in pockets of democratic controlled districts. They
Right.
don't represent America.
Right.
One of the things I was saying to somebody earlier was if you look at a red and blue map of America, there are no blue states.
Mhm.
There are only blue cities. There's no such thing as a blue state.
Right. Hmm.
You have blue cities. Even if you look at California, there's actually more red on their map than blue.
It is, I mean, one of the best walkaway rallies we did of the entire 2020 election season, and we toured all over the country with walkaway, was in Beverly Hills. And after we had a monster rally in Beverly Hills, and then they just kept having rallies every single week for Trump. And it was one of the most inspiring experiences of the whole 2020 election cycle for me.
So conservatives, real Americans still control this country. There are two types of Americans. There are
Mhm.
geographical Americans and there are philosophical Americans. To be a philosophical American, you don't need to be born here. You don't even need to live here. You could be living in a communist country right now, but mentally you're an American because you believe in hard work and you believe in risk and you believe in reward and you believe in freedom. Then there are geographical Americans. Those are people who have USA on their passport because they were born here, but they really don't share the American dream. They really don't share American ideals. They really subscribe to a Marxist or a European mentality.
Mhm.
That's the real battle that we're having right now. We all think it's black and white and Democrat and Republican and vaxxers and non-vaxxers, but the real battle is between philosophical America and geographical America. And we saw the proof of that in the Olympics
Mhm.
because we had geographical Americans that were representing the country and they were not philosophically American. Not all of them. Some of them were wonderful.
Yeah.
But we saw the example of somebody, well, I'm an American because this is what's on my passport, but I don't represent America.
Mhm.
That's where the battle is going to lie.
I think one of the things, just to kind of close this out, that I was so grateful for Trump for, because I was not a Trump fan at the beginning. When I
I
left the
was not either.
Well, and then when I left the Democratic Party, I said the only way I would vote for Trump would be a vote out of spite because I'm not voting for the Democrats. And then he slowly started to, just I warmed up to him. And by the time he left, I was so thankful for the fact that he made me feel proud to be an American again. He made it feel good to be an American again. And that was someone, I went to school in Boston. And the reason I went to school in Boston was because I loved US history. I loved the Revolutionary War era. I used to study the founding fathers all the time. And then at some point in my life, I lost that love, and I felt like Trump brought it back again. And so he has many faults. He does, but I will always be grateful to him for that.
If I can comment really quick, I want to
Sure.
talk about the psychology of Trump.
Yeah, let's do it.
When we look at somebody like Obama would be a person that would be considered mentally stable. He would be mentally healthy, as the DSM-5 would describe him.
Mm-hmm.
And if we looked at Trump through the DSM-5, we'd probably see a few personality flaws.
A narcissist, if you might.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
First off, there was a great forensic psychiatrist. You might enjoy this book. It's called, I believe the book is a special kind of madness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a forensic psychiatrist. And what he did is he went back and he did forensic studies on the psychiatry and psychology of leaders. And what he found was those leaders who would be considered to be psychologically healthy and normal failed. The leaders that succeeded were the leaders who actually would not have been qualified under the terms of a DSM-5 of being mentally healthy. An example would be Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain was the perfect politician. He was normal. He was mentally healthy. And he decided, peace in our time, he's going to go negotiate with Hitler, and he's going to make a negotiation. Meanwhile, you had Winston Churchill, an alcoholic with a manic depressive disorder, who's screaming from the rooftops, you can't make peace with a lunatic. The only thing you do to a lunatic is be a lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
Who was right? When times are tough, the mentally normal person isn't the winner. The winner is the person who is a quarter bubble off level and who does see the world a little different. And that's where Trump was. The last thing I want to say on Trump is simply this. Obama is an ideologue. He came to the presidency with a very set ideology of what he wanted to do. Trump did not come to the White House with any ideology. President Trump is an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. I am an entrepreneur. We are very unusual people because what we do is we look for problems. That's what an entrepreneur does. They look for problems. We consider problems to be opportunity. They're not problems, they're opportunities. Now we look for the best solution. We look for the best people. We find the best solution to it. We implement the solution. We move on. Donald Trump came to the White House with his entrepreneurial mind, not with an ideology. When he got there, using entrepreneurial thinking, which is, what are my options? What is the best solution? Who can carry this out fast? What he proved was that following that basic thinking of economic thinking, conservatism ended up being the right answer. Mm-hmm. He didn't come in saying, I'm a conservative and I'm going to make everything conservative. He came in saying, I'm a problem solver. I fix things. What's the best way to fix it? And every time he fixed it, the answer happened to be conservative because it was the right answer. Mm-hmm. And what that ended up resulting in, it ended up making him the most conservative president since Ronald Reagan. And potentially, I would say that he was probably even a little more conservative than Ronald Reagan. But Ronald Reagan was an ideologue. Ronald Reagan came in with a philosophy. Trump came in with a methodology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, if he had had 4 more years.
Well, people who I know that are close to him are telling me he is going to go for another 4 years.
That's what I keep hearing, is that he's saying he's going to go for another 4 years. I have mixed feelings about this, to be honest. I have mixed feelings. I don't get me wrong. I would love every second of the entertainment value that this would cause us. We would not run out of things to talk about, Mark. But
nope.
I just don't know if it's a good idea. And also, I'm seeing what DeSantis is doing in Florida, and I really like DeSantis quite a bit, actually. I don't know. I'm 50. I'm kind of in the place right now where I'm like, I'm just going to sit back and watch what happens and say what I think about it. But It's going to be entertaining no matter what.
The ideal situation would be if we could have a Trump DeSantis presidency
Yeah.
where we'd have 4 more years of Donald Trump and 8 years of Ron DeSantis.
Mhm.
From an electability standpoint, if we had a Ron DeSantis at the top of the ticket with a very, very active Donald Trump campaigning and supporting for him,
Mhm.
we would probably have a ticket that would be more palatable to some Americans. And I'll tell you the ticket I would love to see. I would like to see Ron DeSantis with Kristi Noem.
Really? I don't like Kristi Noem. I think she's a rhino.
I think she's electable. I mean, she's done some pretty good stuff there. She's done some pretty good conservative things.
Well, to be fair, like the vice presidency is like what did
It's a beauty
someone go
contest.
like it's like your superfluous excellency, right? Ben Franklin that said that. That's who I'm
Yep.
thinking of. Yep.
But it is a beauty contest. I mean, how do you think, how in the world do you think Kamala Harris got the vice presidency? She couldn't even get 2% of the vote
No.
in a primary.
Nope.
So why in the world they elect her? Because she checked boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Kristi Noem checks a female box, you know, that the Republicans could certainly use to put on a ticket.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see what's going to happen. And I'm excited about, the next couple of years. They should be showing up in New Hampshire in about 6 months. All the Republicans are going to be running around.
It's not going to be, Ron DeSantis is clearly the number 2 right now.
Yeah, I think so.
But if Donald Trump decides to run,
Mm-hmm.
the nomination will be his. No one is going to be able to take the nomination from him.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen anyone, in my entire life, I've never seen a politician who has the following that is as absolute run through fire loyal
Mm-hmm.
that Trump has. I mean, you've never seen people out campaigning on street corners and boat brigades of people and flags hanging off the back of their cars for their presidential candidate. This guy brings out the best and the worst in people.
Yes, he does.
He is the most polarizing individual that I've ever seen. And last thing I'll tell you is, and a friend of mine gave me this, Donald Trump has already stated that he's running for office.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that he stated he was running for office was when he filed the class action suit against all of the social media people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes too, because the walkaway campaign's actually involved in that, because when Facebook banned the walkaway group just unilaterally after January 6th, they also banned all of the admin's personal accounts. And so we'll see. I was glad, but you know what? We'll see what's going to happen for 2024. Justin says after Pence dropped the ball, you don't need another Rhino VP. I don't know. I can go either way on that. But Mark, I would love to have you back as we get closer to the election. You're willing to come back on the channel sometime?
Oh, anytime. Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, guys. I do have one more live stream this week, and that's going to be tomorrow. And that's going to be with Nicole Solis. Mark, have you heard this story? Nicole is a woman in Rhode Island who is being sued by the teachers union in Rhode Island because she requested documents from her kid's school about what her child is being taught. And the school wanted to charge her like $9,000 for these documents. And now the teachers union has sued them to prevent these documents from being released. So we have her on the channel tomorrow.
And I understand the documents that they sent her were totally redacted.
Oh, dude, totally redacted. It's just like black ink. That's it. That's what she bought for $9,000. So we're going to talk about that. She's a brave woman, a warrior, and I cannot wait to have a chat with her.
I'll tell you what I'd like to do. Maybe you and I should start a movement here. I want to put cameras in every classroom.
Oh, it's like someone came up with that idea back in May, and then that idea was stolen by Matt Walsh.
Well, I think we should put cameras in every classroom.
I know.
Just think about this. You can put your dog in doggy daycare and watch your freaking dog on a camera, but you can't watch your kid?
I think the same thing, Mark. That's why I tweeted it back in May.
Yep. So we need to start encouraging this.
We're going to start. I actually might be getting a bill on that in New Hampshire. I will know that very, very soon. I already have like 6 state legislators that are interested in it. We're also going to do educational transparency, which is that teachers have to put their materials online that they're using like ahead of time. So we're working on it in New Hampshire. I hope other people were working on it too.
Let me know how I can help.
Excellent. I absolutely will. Well, guys, again, I want to encourage you guys to go check out, if you haven't listened to Dr. Mark Young's podcast with Chuck Woolery, it's called Blunt Force Truth. It's really awesome. I have the link in the description below. And hopefully we will have a chance to talk as we get closer to the election. But guys, take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon. Bye.